Yep. And our purpose today really is just to give folks a chance to talk to each other and learn from each other. We do have a kind of a, let's say, light agenda, loose agenda maybe. Jordan Pirtle is here, who's the Director of Secondary Partnerships, and she will just talk a little bit about what we've seen from the tuition waiver for high school students on our enrollment here. And then we just want to open it up to the folks who are teaching, what you've seen in your classes in fall and winter quarters, what you've experienced, questions, concerns, effective practices that you might want to share with other folks. And then we thought we'd wrap up by just talking a little bit about whether there are any additional academic supports that might be needed or other kinds of resources that would be helpful for those of you, not me, I'm not doing it, those of you teaching high school students in your classes. Sound good? Okay, all right. So we'll start with Jordan, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody for joining us. I thought, just like we did in the fall, it would be good just to start by sharing a little bit of, hey, you just can that wherever you want. It doesn't need to be on me. Just sharing a little bit of data, just to understand where we've been and where we currently are a little bit. So historically, if we look at our student numbers, student enrollment, year to year, we usually hover around 5,000, 5,500 high school students that take at least one course with MCC within a traditional academic year. And when I say traditional academic year, I am referring to August to May, when typically a student, a high school student is enrolled. So when we look at enrollment from this fall, we were at 6,200 high school students registered at MCC in at least one credit-bearing course. So right there alone, we had significant increase, we could say, in students just for the fall quarter. Or actually, I should say fall semester, because when we look at fall numbers, I'm going to share with you just a few credit hour data points. When we say fall, we're looking at MCC's quarter system. So the students that are here on campus or online, just taking courses through our traditional quarter, and we are also looking at our high school students that are taking college credit courses in the high school with approved high school faculty for concurrent enrollment. So those numbers span, again, the semester, August to December, or just our fall quarter. I don't have fresh I don't have winter stats for you yet, or what we term spring semester in secondary partnerships, because we're actually at the very tail end of registration of high school students in the high schools. So these numbers are just from fall. So fall to fall comparison, fall 21 to fall 2022, we had a 28% increase in high school students taking credit hours with MCC. So the biggest impact where we felt that was concurrent enrollment, the courses that are taken in the high school by high school faculty. We do have a handful, I'd say less than 10 to 15 courses that are being delivered in the high school by an MCC faculty member. And for right now, we still lump them underneath the concurrent enrollment heading. But we also saw an increase in students participating in career academies. So the career academies that take place on any one of our campus locations. We have upwards of 25 career academies this year that students could participate in. So they're with us Monday through Thursday, 12:30 to 3:30 generally, every single quarter through the year. So we did have a significant increase there in participation. 31% increase in College Now. So College Now is any high school student taking a college credit course at MCC on campus or online, just like any other student would be taking classes. We just coin it College Now to help separate that as a high school student enrolling in a program. So just wanted to give a general snapshot of where we are with enrollment. So we certainly have had an increase in enrollment, and the purpose of these sessions is to hear from you. How is it going? What are things that we need to think about that we haven't thought about, especially as we continue to move forward with this tuition waiver? What is the impact that we're feeling? What additional supports should we put in place? Are there things that we need to consider that we haven't considered before? So looking forward to that conversation.
Thanks, Jordan. Before we get to sharing experiences, are there questions for Jordan? You feel free to unmute or to put something in the chat. We'll watch that too.
The numbers that you're talking, is that just on campus? That's definitely not just on campus. That's like actually in the high schools themselves, right?
Yeah, so all the numbers that I just shared with you, so the 6,200 students there, that number incorporates all of our program pathways. So secondary partnerships, we have 5 different program pathways for which students participate in. So they could be in high school, they could be here, they could be online. That blends all of them together.
And then I was told in the email that I got for the invite that I have a high school student. I do not know I have a high school student. I was not told that. Am I not supposed to be told that, or am I supposed to ask about that?
Such a great question, Dustin. So perhaps you have a high school student in one of your courses that you're teaching on campus or online, and they haven't self-identified, and that's great. There's no need for them to know unless you're teaching a specific section that is for high school students. There's a high possibility that you have no idea there's a high school student in there.
Because you said the point of this whole session is to know like how are things going. I don't know because I don't know who my high school student is.
And we love to hear that feedback too, because then that tells us that so far it's going okay for that high school student. There hasn't been any hiccups along the way, that something that we didn't see coming, because we don't require students to identify inside their classroom if they are a high school student or not with you. So that is good feedback, Dustin. We can take that.
I have a question though. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I was discussing about the whole enrollment, and as I've heard you, just 2 questions though. Number one, do we have other schools that Metro is partnered with besides what I heard from some of my colleagues and some other students, that they heard that we only partnered with only Millard schools? Is there any other partnership with OPS that I am not aware of?
We have a partnership with nearly every single high school within our 4-county area in some capacity. Yep. And I can share that. I'm happy to share that data with you. I don't have it with me today, but it's an easy poll to show you exactly where we have enrollment. But I would say at this point, we have at least 1 student from every district participating somehow with MCC.
Okay. The next question though is, just based on my experiences though, do we have any kind of consent from parents in terms of how I can speak only for myself, my delivery? Again, I am not differentiating high school or college. I'm doing it based on who they are. And I just want to make sure there's no issues that could lead to any kind of angry parents.
We have a couple of things in place. Go ahead.
Hi, Kojo. It's Tom McDonald.
Hey, Tom, Happy New Year.
Hey, same to you. Oh, see, no need to pan. You can hear me now.
Nerve-wracking.
So, yeah, it's a great question. And I think the thing I think Jordan emphasizes, and I would emphasize as well, is that our courses are our courses. If a high school student is in a college course, then that high school student should expect college level content, college level maturity. And yeah, I think we try our best to make sure parents understand that, but I know parents come at it a little differently, because they kind of see their student as still in high school, and that we have to try to find a way to make our courses high school friendly, so to speak. And that's really not that's not our vibe. That's not our jam. We're gonna teach our college content in the way we see fit. And so I think that sometimes, like in Dustin's case, not that there are mature subjects talked about in math classes, they're just, crunching numbers. But even in that case, we're not going to dumb something down or water it down or change it just because there's a high school student in the class. So maybe not knowing when you have a high school student in your class is probably an advantage, because you just teach your class like you would always teach your class.
And
I
Kojo,
appreciate that.
Sorry, Rachel.
Kojo, we have some parent consent requirements depending on the program pathway that they're enrolled in. So there are parents that are providing their signature approval that yes, my student, I understand they're going to be taking an MCC college credit course with MCC. So in some capacity, yes, we do have consent.
That is so good, because at my Elcon class, I have a 15-year-old. So, every time I become a little bit conversant of her age and some content that I had to sometimes, what I use is apologetic, but at the same time, she's comfortable with it though, but I just want to make sure I am a gung-ho, but my topics in sociology is sometimes I cannot be able to modify it just because it's high school. We must go the way we go. I want to make sure parents just don't come complaining. That's all.
Monique has her hand up, and then we've got some questions in the chat too.
I was
Monique.
just going to add to the question, which y'all kind of already fully answered, as far as parents go. If you have access to colleague, I'm not sure if everybody on here does, you can go in and look at the FERPA sheet and see if the student has their parent listed. If they're not listed, you're not obligated to share any information with the parent on that student's progress, because it is college, a college level class. Did I answer that correctly?
I think you did, yeah. I think with FERPA, FERPA is about access to student records. So, even with FERPA, there are questions that are kind of, questions from parents that are inbounds and maybe some that are out of bounds. If a student is signed a waiver, basically waiving their FERPA rights so mom and dad can have access to records, that means they can ask you things about, well, what grade did my kid get on the last test, or what's the attendance record so far? But they still can't, asking questions about content to me is a little out of bounds. It's not what FERPA was intended to do. So asking, what did Johnny say in class when you were talking about LGBTQ issues or whatever it might be? That's not for you to have to disclose to them. Does that make sense? Good. I see people nodding. That's good.
Andrew had a question about FERPA in the chat. So Andrew, did that get at what you were asking?
Yeah, thanks. I think that answered it.
And then sort of back to the idea of how do we know we have these students? Rachel wrote that some students have high school secondary partnerships listed as the program, and she can see it on her roster. So how are those students different, Jordan, than just a regular dual enrollment? Or are they different?
So new this year for high school, majority of our high school students, the program of study, what we coin as high five in our office, it's just 5 H's. That's just showing you that they're a high school student. We wanted to pull them out of specific program of studies for various reasons. The first one is majority of students aren't here for degree completion. They're here to supplement their high school experience with some college credit courses. So creating that program of study helped align with path forward. Did that answer your question, or is that off?
So the 5 H's is a degree code, is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so those are, who gets that exactly?
High school students, all high school students with some pockets of exceptions.
Okay, so now we should be able to see if we have it. So the problem of not knowing who they are is kind of one of the past.
Possibly, I don't know exactly. So Rachel, was that Rachel that asked that? So I don't know what faculty can see on a student's record, whether that's an advisor or colleague. I don't know what that looks like, but if you can see a student's declared major, then yes, you would know that they're a high school student by that.
Yeah, that shows up on my roster in the self-service. When I go to my class roster, if I hover my mouse over the student's name, it pops up the student's name, the student's program, and their contact information. So I don't mess in colleague because I just can't figure it out and I've given up. But on my roster, which all faculty can see their rosters, that's where I see it. And that was there starting in the fall.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
I think those 5 H's show up on the colleague roster if you pull it from colleague, because you'll have the program code.
Interesting. Okay.
Other questions?
I do. I think it's probably more of an anomaly than anything is, I've worked with or taught high school students quite a bit in the past. And And one set of high school students that I get often are students that are homeschooled, and they're taking a supplemental class at Metro. And they've always been fantastic, but coincidentally, this week, I've had a homeschool student that I'm having a very difficult time contacting. And I actually reached out to Jackie Woods to see, like, how do I get a hold of this student? And if they don't have a high school counselor that you guys have like a relationship with, like, how does that work with homeschooled students?
That's a really great question, Leanne. So right now, I would say for the majority of our homeschool population, when they intersect with MCC, they're working with either a success navigator or an academic advisor on their course selection and registration of courses. So I'd want to first see if they're tied to a success navigator and advisor that's working with them.
I think what we discovered, it's through DSS. So, and even they are having a hard time, or we're having a hard time getting a hold of this student. So I think it's just like an anomaly. It's just a weird thing, but it's important that I get a hold of her and communicate with this student. And it's been kind of hard.
Well, yeah, I mean, if DSS is still having issues getting a hold of them, that our protocol, we would look to see who they've been currently working with, whether it was in Stark and Colleague or checking advice to see who they're assigned to hopefully get somebody that's has a connection with them to reach out. So I guess in this interesting situation, continue to work with DSS since they have a relationship, see if they can get a hold of her or him, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
These are great questions. What about experiences this fall, this winter, or even previously, whether they're challenges or just things that have gone really well, some effective practices? I know I kind of queued up Leanne and Kojo to share some things. I don't know if they've got something ready, but we'd love to hear about how things are going in the classroom.
I will say though, again, I want to thank everybody for this great meeting. It's been fantastic though. For me, I can only speak for myself. It's been a journey to Fremont and also at Elcom. So what I have done though is, my challenge is just the block, because they are still going with high school class block, which is just 1 hour for me. With the college classes, we just go about 2 hours or maybe hour and 45 minutes. So what I've done though, to be a little bit creative, is to engage them in what I call daily assignments that we could use for discussion and use it more profitably, that we just don't run out of time. So that's been my challenge, just the block of time, just 1 hour, don't allow me a lot of creativity, but I've developed the way that we can all get assignments going. And also I would love to talk to my dean and my other colleague, is some of my high school students, some of them are about maybe 5 of them are not used to doing what I call the ebooks. So if I could be able to get an extra books, maybe at the Fremont Library, that would be good for me, because the ebooks are not for everybody, so that's just what I have been doing. It's been fantastic, and just adjusting the teaching method so that everybody become inclusive, instead of just what I told them. I am not going to be here to click all day. We are going to be talking and getting involved in the course material, and that's been working out fine. And they are coming though. I never, only about 1 or 2 that I talked to Rachel about that have not showed up, so, but other ones, attendance has been really exciting.
Kojo, can I ask you, you said it's been fantastic. Have high school students brought something to your classes that wasn't there before? What do they contribute, and how do they do that differently than our?
Well, I use kind of what I use in other college classes, though. It's called abstract or daily research, where I have them write. And I've looked at their writings though. It's impeccable though. They are writing well based on what I see them. So they're turning their papers in, and I'm going to see this coming week will be the first exam, you know. So, but their writings are very, very nice.
Good to hear.
The reason I was interested in this meeting, and my case is a little different. So I'm in Gateway to College in secondary partnership. So when we teach our class, it is strictly just high school students. And coming from having an OPS and Boys Town background, doing nothing but middle and high school, I found myself finding it hard to transition and make sure the rigor was still there without watering it down, if that makes sense, the curriculum.
Yeah, does anybody want to address that? I think that is, and Tom, you kind of alluded to that we teach the classes that we teach.
Right. Right.
Say more about that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, and I know we follow some of the NACEP standards, help me out, is it the National Association of Concurrent Enrollment Programs? Am I close?
Oh,
Partnerships.
yeah.
Okay, great. But that's an accrediting set of guidelines that we don't necessarily, we're not NACEP accredited, but we follow those guidelines. Our Higher Learning Commission guidelines are the same in that the expectation is if you're doing something for essentially college credit, whether it's taught in the high school, whether it's taught on your campus, whether it's a blend of those things, or it's online or whatever, that those high school students are getting your college class. And, you know, so this notion of, I was at a statewide meeting the other day, and one of my chief academic officer colleagues talked about in their service area, one of their partner high schools says, all right, if you take world civilizations, you can apply it to, you can either take it as AP, or take it for dual credit with Nebraska Wesleyan, or take it for credit with our community college. But that totally flies in the face of, and his question to all of us was, am I going to get dinged for this when HLC comes to town? And I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely you are, because the expectation is that we're all teaching Metro content in those classes, period, end of story. So I guess that's, yeah, you know, rigor is one thing, but making sure that we're meeting all the objectives of our courses that are as written in our outline is really the main thing. I realize sometimes, especially when we're talking about like a high school semester where they're in class every day with that teacher, you know, we're talking about like a high school teacher teaching high school students, you know, at their location. Their time on content is way longer than what we would have if they were on our campus. So they might add some other things to that content, but just hitting all of our course objectives are really super important. That's all.
Monique, were you speaking specifically to the work 1403 that you guys deliver, or other?
In a sense, I was just trying to maybe get more ideas from other instructors, even if they don't necessarily know they have a high school student, how they kind of structure their class, what schools and different policies they put in place to make sure it's still at that level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to hear any feedback. My one comment that I was going to make, certainly lean into Tammy Madsen, who oversees all the work content areas for extra maybe support or ideas on how to contribute to that curriculum that you guys are delivering over there at Gateway. She'd probably be an excellent resource.
Can I ask a question again, though? In the near future, though, again, this has been my first time being back at Fremont for a long time. I am asking, you know, I know this is for Tom and my dean, can we put some more resources in terms of like after school hour tutorials, if they need be. They're doing a great job though. For this quarter, there's no extra tutorial needed that I have not met the need, but I'm just talking about in the future, can they be able to have the resources that, maybe we have a paper to write or maybe exam to take, that we can have the resources there to help them navigate those kinds of issues.
So are you teaching at the Fremont Center or are you in the high school?
No, I'm at our campus.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good conversation between you and I, your dean, and Todd Hansen out at Fremont about and probably Julie Ashley too, with some Learning Tutoring Center help out there.
Okay.
Making sure we got what we need in place to serve that group of students.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jordan, Rachel asked a question in the chat, and I'm going to read it just for the benefit of the folks in the room who can't see the chat. In the onboarding process, are IEPs discussed? In the last couple of quarters, I've had students say something at week 5 or 6 about their high school IEP. I then direct them to a DSS counselor to get the process started, but week 5 or 6 is too late.
Yeah, that is. So students, what becomes maybe a challenge between high school and post-secondary is that the high school, their parents or counselors are advocating for the support. Whereas in college, we require the student to advocate. So some education perhaps needs to, maybe we need to look at the different type of education we're providing students to make sure they understand the process of being referred to the DSS office and how to get that support. We do have that embedded within, again, different programs. Gateway to College, it's addressed immediately upon enrollment or acceptance. Same with our career academies, but with College Now, it might not be addressed because it's not, those students can enter the college just as any other student would through contact center or through a success navigator, academic advisor. So perhaps there is an area of opportunity there, Rachel, that we need to make sure that all students understand the importance and how to connect with the DSS office in those pockets that we might not have direct communication with them. So that's good feedback.
Do we have a syllabus statement or anything on requesting accommodations or?
There's something in the syllabus, I think, in general, but 95% of students aren't reading that. They read the important information about the course and the grading of the course and then the schedule of assignments. They're not reading those middle pages. I mean, we write them, they're in there. There is a statement about DSS and accommodations, but it's not really addressed.
Right. Well, and I think we know even from our recent high school graduates who come to campus who may have gone their entire K-12 career with those accommodations in place, and they get here and they're like, I don't want to be singled out in that way, so I'm going to try to go without the accommodation. So there may be some of that in play too.
It might be something, it's hard to get in the habit of, especially in the beginning of the quarter, saying things every quarter, but we might just need to say, if you had an IEP in college and are interested in speaking to DSS, and then provide that information. Yeah, it's definitely in the syllabus, but.
Well, and I'll also add this, the DSS office makes it so easy. When I had a student, I CC'd the student on my email to Kim Wren and Lisa Fleming Hale, responded within 40 minutes with a QR code for the student to jump in and submit their documents. And so it was done, and taken care of within 2 days. So they're doing a great job on their side. We just don't know what we don't know. When the student needs that and they have, a legitimate need for accommodations. I tell my students, this is our process. This is what you need to do. Once they get there, it's easy, but it's just knowing that they have to get there.
Yeah, I do want to comment with that. And this is, not only for our high school students, but just all of our MCC students, is at the beginning of every quarter, I will go over the syllabus, but then I will make it a point like, hey, I'll mention IEPs from high school, and then how at college it's more like student led in that way. And I really encourage them to reach out to DSS if accommodations are needed. And last quarter or 2 quarters ago, I had a student who said, "You have been the first instructor that has ever encouraged us to do that or had mentioned it." So it goes back to, what Rachel said is, yeah, it's in the syllabus, but students are just going to remember like, okay, how am I going to get a grade, out of this class? So I think it's important to just kind of, share, the DSS resource that we have at Metro also. So he was grateful for it. And he went, and just like with Rachel said, he went there and got a plan set up right away.
Love that, Leanne, because we're all the same way. I think that even us, we have to hear things multiple times before it sinks in and we take action on it. So having the opportunity for students to hear that DSS services, FERPA is a constant conversation in the Office of Secondary Partnerships, because it doesn't matter how many ways we put out the need for these authorization release information forms be filled out. Sometimes it just falls on deaf ears. So I appreciate, Leanne, that feedback of just helping make sure students hear it from multiple people in different ways.
One thing that Leanne has sort of taught me, listening to her talk about the resources she developed, is how helpful it is to be explicit about the differences between high school and college. To not just say like, oh, hey, you need to go to DSS, but to say in high school, it works this way, but at MCC or in college, it works this way. And of course, I don't always know how it works in high school, but I think that can be really helpful to like really point out those differences. And I've heard Leanne say that a few times about some differences that we don't even think about because we're here, Yeah.
So this is like way off of, I think, what we're talking about with, accommodations and stuff. But another big difference that I've seen with my high school students and when they come to MCC is we're using Canvas at Metro. And I would say the majority of my high school students that I'm aware of, who are my high school students, they're used to Google Classroom. And for them to make the leap from Google Classroom to Canvas, I think it's really challenging for a lot of students. So again, that's another thing that I have to reinforce multiple times is, this isn't Google Classroom. I think there are instructors that do use Google Classroom, but that's probably one of the biggest, I don't want to say it's a challenge, but I think it's a hiccup in the courses as students kind of make that adjustment.
Leanne, are you delivering a lot of the Plano Vista SRP Center this year?
Yeah, well, yeah, I do that for the fall quarter. So I teach human geography, which is only offered fall quarter. So yeah, that's them. And then, I teach at Elkhorn, so I'll get a lot of homeschool students, but then I get a sprinkling of, maybe Millard North or Elkhorn students that are there too.
Gotcha.
Does everybody use Google Classroom? Does that even vary by district?
It varies because OPS is Canvas, but Millard is Google. It varies.
Yeah, and that would make sense because I'm at Elkhorn. I get more of the Millard students.
I think we often think about older students or folks who have been out of school for longer, struggling with technology, but our younger students, our high school age students do too, maybe more adept at using their phone for things. Have other people in the Zoom room experience technology issues with students from high school? See Kojo nodding.
Yeah, I was. Well, my nodding though is, again, I can't overemphasize the great support from Fremont, Rachel, and Todd Hansen. I requested a computer room this quarter, and I went through kind of like a little orientation on how to access the Canvas the first day, and Rachel was able to help me to have them to get their login and password if any of them had an issue. So again, it just taking that time, that just might take taking that time in the first day of class to help them understand the mode that we're going to be teaching and where to turn their homework in. And if there are any question that first day, we dealt with it. So that's just been, again, exciting at Fremont, that kind of support. So I don't know what's going to happen next quarter, but the computer room was very, very helpful for them to go through it. And some of them brought their own computer too. They were able to access the Canvas homework with their own computer. So everything is, again, working out. But I will encourage, other instructors, again, every high school, as I'm hearing about Millard having a different modality. But again, if we can just let them know, hey, at MCC, Canvas is the order of the day. How can we help you to access Canvas?
When I sent out the invitation for this session, I targeted some of you because you had high school students in your class. One faculty member emailed me back and said she couldn't make it, but had concerns about social interactions in her class between students who are in high school and others who may be in their, I think, probably younger 20s, and people not knowing the age difference. And she didn't know how to navigate that. I don't know if I have any advice, but I don't know if other folks here have experienced concerns or just situations with social interactions of students in your classes.
Take that though, again, at my Elcom class, the first day of class, I take a moment to introduce everybody, to introduce themselves. And I made sure that, again, in that Elcom class, it's kind of like different age group, but I wanted them to understand that we have a high school student coming out of Bennington, and there was no difference in treating her. She was part of the group of presentation. It's just for them to be aware, but if she didn't open her mouth to tell you her age, you wouldn't know. So it's that inclusiveness and making that class very, what I call an atmosphere where learning can take place regardless of the age of that student.
Yeah, thanks, Kojo. Begana, hi.
Hi, so I teach psychology, and this semester I have a high school student in my class, but in the past I've also gone to the high school to teach classes. I wanted to kind of address the previous question and say that I've had both good and not so good, I'm not saying bad, but experiences with having high school students. First of all, when it was the first time that I was going to teach high school students, I was told, oh my God, God help you. And, just the impression that we have of, teenagers and things like that. But my experience has been the opposite, because I usually have found that because they've been in school, they're used to studying, they're used to homework. So they kind of find that easier. They're less resistant to, oh, it's so much, or oh, already an exam. Whereas adult students who've been working, in the workforce and are coming back to education after a long time, in fact, I think sometimes will complain more or find that adjustment difficult, but not with high school students. I've seen that a lot of them are quite sincere. And in terms of this interaction, I will say that, so the two things that I wanted to point out was, one is in terms of professional writing, when you're giving them a writing assignment, or even in terms of emailing, the professionality is not always, because they're used to texting and, so sometimes that is a factor that you kind of have to address in terms of, this is college level course, and there are some, protocols or things that you have to kind of keep in mind when, so that's one thing that I found that some high school students found challenging. And in terms of the second aspect, I find that I learn quite a bit. So in the beginning, I make it a point to have them introduce themselves, and usually they'll say that I'm still in high school. And that helps kind of make the course more relevant to them. So I make sure that when I'm giving examples or asking for situations, I make sure that I'm including that as well, and not just assuming that everybody is an adult here or has children or has, so that helps when they feel that, oh, somebody's specifically addressing me and including me in this conversation. That automatically gives them, and then having some kind of interaction, deliberate interaction, where they are paired with somebody else who's not a high school student. That I think helps kind of break that barrier where they feel that, oh, I belong in this class as well. It's not something where they feel estranged or whatever. And I have learned, in terms of terminology, I've learned quite a bit. One student called me a goat, and I spent a long time thinking about why I'm being called a farm animal till I learned that I'm sure you guys know what goat is. I didn't at that time, but so yeah, it's been an interesting experience for me.
Were you happy when you figured it out? You're the greatest teacher of all.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank God.
Yeah, thank you, Morgana. It's one part of the discussion I wanted to have was about resources, and actually that's almost a good transition, because if a faculty member came to me with sort of questions about helping students write at a level that she was looking for, I would refer them to the Writing Center because they do such a nice job working with students. But I don't know if students in high school who are taking a class on our campus, would ever use the Writing Center. Would they think about coming after class to visit with one of those folks? Would they go to the LTCs? I just don't know what their use is. Have you referred high school students to our academic support services? Do you get a sense that they would use them?
No, I have, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, Jared, hi.
Hi. So I'd like to share my experience and talk about resources maybe in a little bit different way here, particularly with lab environments. So I'm currently teaching and have been for last few quarters, several high school integrated classes, and they've been great. Let me tell you, I love having kind of these cohort classes come through, and it's been a very great experience. Kind of a little more silliness kind of comes out, which is probably good and needed in some of our courses. And but one thing that I'm seeing is we're expanding out and trying to keep the experience the same. I'm not finding that as well, and that message isn't necessarily trickling down, at least to us. For instance, we have a PC repair class where half of the class is a lab where you are working and repairing on PCs. And so now I'm working with Blair High School, and I was literally told to water the class down to just get it through, not have that same experience. And also we're trying to build these labs so that North and Northwest can travel down to Fort instead of having them travel down to South for some of these very specific classes. And we're getting some pushback on that. And I'm just not sure how that can happen if they can't have that exact same experience in a lab environment with that equipment that they need for some of these type of classes. And then third, sorry, I'm not throwing a lot out here, is sometimes scheduling of things seems to be where we need to match our schedule to the high school schedule, including over breaks and other things, which has thrown a lot of things off as well. So I don't know if there's an answer to any of that, but
I think the folks in the room probably can help there. I'm gonna maybe ask Tom to address the second part, which is about the course outlines and keeping things standardized. And then maybe Jordan would talk a bit about the challenges of scheduling. And Jared, what was the first piece? I've got the second and third. What was the first piece of the question?
First piece is, I believe, just having that same experience, and you can't have that same experience if they don't have an access to the lab environment for several of these classes and courses that we offer. It's built very well at South, but you can't expect people from North and Northwest to come all the way down to the South campus.
Yeah, and I think on that front, the use of building 10 at the Fort for North and Northwest. I think it's kind of been a moving target as far as just what the potential enrollments are there. So I think yeah, I don't think anybody's ruled out the idea of replicating or building some kind of facility at Fort in building 10 for your classes, Jared. It's just, I don't know that we know for sure yet what the reality is in terms of numbers.
Yeah, OPS, Jared, OPS still has some policy that they need to work through and change before we're able to get specifically to directly answer the OPS North question or comment that you had made.
Right.
We're not going to see them in fall of 2023. There's some policy that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, a little play on the field of dreams.
Yeah.
If we build it, they still might not come. So we're not going to build it first and then find out they're not coming.
Right.
No, that makes sense.
And then what was the piece on?
Well, there's Blair, but
Yeah.
and then there's working on different schedules. I mean, sometimes working, these classes that don't exactly line up all the time, particularly over breaks and other things that align directly with our quarter system.
Yeah, again, I guess I would say in terms of content, that's probably a good three-way conversation, maybe between you and your dean and Jordan, to try to, maybe help us nudge the Blair folks back into the line. And again, understanding that the course content, it has to be ours. It can't be watered down. If we're conferring credit for a Metro course, then it has to meet the Metro objectives.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So Jared, definitely want to take that conversation with Blair and let's tackle that maybe together with our.
Yeah, I don't think the issue is with Blair. So, I mean, it's coming from our side.
Well,
So it is what I'm being told. So
There's some equipment.
It's coming down to me. So yeah.
Some equipment issues maybe with Blair too that we need to figure out as
Well,
well.
and I've offered alternative courses that might be better fits, but I don't know. But I think it falls on deaf ears, and so anyway, I don't know how this communication, it doesn't seem free flowing, at least with some of these issues.
Yeah, I will say to your point, and because it's not the first time I've heard it, that sometimes there may be a perception even within MCC that, oh, I'm teaching a room full of high school students. I need to adjust my content accordingly, make it more age appropriate or skill level appropriate or whatever. And again, that's not the expectation, at least not from Jordan, not from me, or from the college. So, if you're running into that and it's more internal, we can have that conversation too.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Jared. Others? Comments, questions, concerns?
Well, I can just speak to your question about, using Math Center is what would apply in my case. I take all of my students to the Math Center, usually that third class meeting. And I walk all of them down there so they can see where it is. And I talk about it all the time. They probably get sick of me. I actually just responded to a student's email, including the link to the Math Center. So I think that it's pretty accessible, especially with, and I'm not sure about the Writing Center, but I know the LTC has an online function now also that we got out of the pandemic with the Math Center. So they've got resources. How many of them use it is a different question, but we make it really easy for students to access that resource, either on campus, or we have Math Center help available through Zoom 7 days a week. So they can get the help. Some of them use it and report back that they hey, I talked with Buck and he helped me a lot. I'm like, great, that's fantastic. Sometimes I never know, but it's really made available. And I've even, when just having casual conversations with students who are talking about a writing thing, mention the Writing Center to them. And they're like, oh, I didn't know I could work on something that's, an application I'm filling out and an essay that I have to do. So it's, I think, getting out there, that information about our resources.
We have trouble getting everyone there, so.
Yes.
So back again on resources, I guess I kind of skipped away from that. Resources for students that might be needed, or what about for you as faculty? Are there, Is there information, instructional techniques or strategies or things that might be useful for you that we could pull together and provide? Got a thumbs up from Coach. Well, I do want to share, in case any of you here aren't aware of the really great resource that Leanne put together for us that we shared actually at the last roundtable, which is just a Canvas resources course. We're not really calling it a course, it's resources in Canvas. And it has just some information about high school students and community colleges. And then she has put together just some really great materials about adolescent development. Actually, Leanne, you're here. Do you want to just give us a quick walkthrough of the material?
Well, I think actually, didn't Amy Rector do this?
Oh,
Amy, yeah.
yes, she did.
I can't take credit for this. This is fantastic. No,
Why did I think that you did it? Maybe I've learned so much about high school students from you that I've just put you together with her. Well, I'll tell you about then. So
no, I think I shared something that Ryan put together in my last share, but no, this that Amy put together is fantastic.
yeah. Did I pay you for it or did I pay her?
You definitely paid her. You
I hope I paid her, not you. Available to, yeah, I just have to add you. So Monique, I can add you to the class. So if you're not in this, we just need to add you manually. You can send me an email and I will put you in it so you can have access to these resources. There's no activities or assignments. It's just resources. So send me an email and I'll get you added.
They don't get a grade for taking.
No grade, no grade, no grade. Any in the room, any final words? Scott, you've been very quiet.
Well, I mean, the one thing that Rachel talked about, the math center, like I had one of my high school students who was homeschooled and I just caught him walking because at the south, the Mahoney building is where all the classes are, but the connector building is where my office is and where the math center is. And so he was just sort of walking aimlessly around the connector building because he had no idea where anything was. And so that's when I'm making a point to really show everyone where it is, because Mahoney is a maze and so is.
Yeah, those tours make a huge difference. You can talk about it endlessly, but getting people in the door is the thing.
Yeah, and so I showed him around and then I showed a couple others around. So that's helpful because you sort of take it for granted a little bit. You're like, oh, some of these people have probably taken these classes multiple times here, but high school students, right? You don't necessarily know when you have students in there that might need that extra support of just like, hey, I'm going to walk you to where this is, where it might be helpful.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, it's impactful. All right, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. You can always email or get in touch with other questions, and we hope to see you again spring. Jordan, we're gonna do it again in the spring.
Yep.
I think April 28th maybe. So we'll see you then.